Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So good to have you today. Welcome to Intro to Organic Seed Production Session 1. This is Making the Case and Making the Space for Seed Production. And my name is Heron Breen. Before we start with our preamble and our introductions, this presentation is miraculously brought to you in French and English. And in a moment, we're going to enable that function. And this involves you all doing something. I'm going to wait a minute for everybody to kind of get settled in, and then we'll give everyone instructions. Okay. So here's how this works. In a moment, we have two translators with us today. We have Peter Feldstein and Brian Bickford, and they're going to help us today with dual translation, French-English translation. How this works is when we enable the translation, you are going to see a globe icon show up on your toolbar. What you will need to do immediately is go to that globe icon and select the language of your choice, English or French. Okay? There's also the option to mute original audio. If you see that option, also choose that option. So I'll repeat this again in just a second. We still have a lot of people joining us. Peter, would you like to say that in French for us, for everyone?
Yeah, here goes. Donc, bonjour, bienvenue à cette séance sur la production de semences, faire de l'espace pour les semences. Donc, nous allons offrir la traduction simultanée en français et en anglais. Le service d'interprétation simultanée est donc offert. Et si vous voulez écouter l'interprétation en français, vous n'avez qu'à cliquer sur l'icône en forme de globe au bas de l'écran où vous voyez le mot interpretation, interprétation, et choisissez le français. Vous pouvez aussi choisir Mute Original Audio pour taire l'anglais, sinon vous l'entendrez en sourdine. Si vous éprouvez des difficultés techniques pendant la séance, par exemple les deux interprètes parlent en même temps ou il n'y a pas d'interprétation, vous n'avez qu'à communiquer avec nous par la boîte de clavardage au bas de l'écran où c'est écrit chat et on réglera votre problème rapidement. Dans la période de questions, vous pourrez indiquer que vous voulez poser une question et on va vous reconnaître et ouvrir votre microphone pour que vous puissiez la poser verbalement. La question sera traduite simultanément en anglais et vous entendrez la réponse en français.
Thank you, Peter. Also, if you are joining us, and Peter may have already said this, but if you are joining us and you are going to be speaking French, please speak French. We love that. And speak French when you ask your question, which I think Peter already just said. And if Peter did not,
I did.
Okay, great. Cool. Okay. I would say at this point, Peter will be pasting these instructions in French into the chat at various points during the session. And we may repeat these instructions at later on, just so folks are aware. And at this point, Jessica, would you place Peter and Brian in the Zoom translation booth? Thank you so much. And you will all immediately see, or very soon see, that globe which we were speaking of. I personally have seen the globe, and I have also gone to the globe and selected the language of my choice, as well as mute original audio, which we recommend. Giving them a chance to do that. Okay. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Crystal, why don't we go ahead and start the slides?
All right.
Welcome again to the intro to Organic Seed Production Session 1, Making the Case and Making the Space for Seed Production. We have Matthew, Glenn, Chris Sanford, and Lori McKenzie today is not here with us, but Michaela Colley is here with us today, who'll be standing in. Thank you, Michaela, for joining us. This live French translation is brought to you with support from the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security. we thank them so much for making this opportunity available to everybody. My name is Heron Breen. I live in Central Maine, and I work at Fedco as well as farm in Central Maine. My hometown is St. Albans. And the NOFA New York Winter Conference and the Northeast Organic Seed Conference join together every 2 years. You are participating in the third collaboration. Please enjoy as many workshops at this dual online conference as possible. We want to let everyone know this workshop is being recorded. Thank you. Crystal, next slide, thank you. You are seeing the community agreements that we are all trying to use this week to make this online conference work. Most of these agreements are very obvious and mostly based upon respect for each other and our differing views or differing perspectives. But very clearly, one or two that I think need to be highlighted. One is jargon. Be sure when you are speaking, if you're using acronyms or kind of jargon that's familiar to you, do not assume that everyone is familiar with that same jargon, and please spell out the acronyms which you are using. Also, be patient. We are in this Zoom platform. It's not easy for us all, and we all have technical limitations. One reminder on that is that your raise hand function, if you are on the phone, is *9. If you are here joining using the Zoom platform directly, it should be under your responses button, which is sort of a reactions button, which is on your toolbar. It can also be used usually under sort of your sometimes under your hovering over your name. Hold on a second, sorry. Next slide. We acknowledge we are on land that was managed and lived with before European colonization. Please take a moment to reflect where you are in this moment. If you know what indigenous community lived with and continues to live with the land where you are right now, please feel free to acknowledge in the chat. If you want to learn more, this helpful website link on this slide expands to the whole country as well as the world. Many of us are joining from other places in the country. But let's take a moment of silence, of prayer, or mindfulness in acknowledgement of this land and their stewards. Next slide. We also want to offer the resources of the In Living Color virtual Black, Indigenous, People of Color space during these conferences. We're really thankful to have the support of facilitators Amanda David and Mandana Bushi during this conference. Please refer both to your conference program through the app, the portal itself, as well as this slide to be able to get a hold of folks if you need to. Next slide. We also have some really great keynotes. Some of these have already happened. Laura Legnick's, and these are available as a recording. Please don't miss out on the upcoming ones. These are super generous folks coming to us with some really interesting messages that are, at this point, I would say we're all a little bit still recovering from the first one, and I'm sure on Thursday we'll have our worlds rocked again. Thank you. Next slide. We have some UVM note takers with us today, and this is part of an overall needs assessment that is being done related to seed work in the region. The notes that are taken will not include any personal or identifying information, and we'll be seeing some of this information helping to inform the needs assessment for the community, for the seed community, that will be occurring next Sunday, the 24th. Now, if those folks who are part of this UVM note-taking crew could just acknowledge themselves in the chat. I know they have a link that they'll be pasting in there regarding a map of the organic seed community. So go take a look at that. Next slide. We also have this wonderful, as I said, Needs Assessment Day next Sunday, the 24th. Please join us for this day where we're going to try to sit down and take stock of our strengths and weaknesses and challenges and brainstorm what's needed to build resiliency in our region. This will be moderated by Hannah Tragus and Jackie Pilati. Hannah and Jackie have both been in sessions. You've seen them moderating and speaking on Saturday and Sunday. And there's also a number of free sessions. The needs assessment is a free session. And we're going to paste in a moment, we're going to paste a link to get to those free sessions. Those free sessions are available to not just folks on this portal through the normal Socio app, but through for your friends and folks that may not have been able to pay for the conference. Next slide. And I'm going to hand this back over to Crystal Stewart and Maggie Erickson to introduce folks. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Heron. I'm actually just going to start by introducing myself and giving you some context for these two sessions which interact with the rest of the NOFA sessions. We're really excited to be merging the SEED conference and the rest of the NOFA New York conference through the vegetable track. My name is Crystal Stewart-Courtens. I'm the coordinator of all of the vegetable sessions. So we tried very hard to make our programming applicable to what vegetable farmers need for this season. So we've been talking a lot about resilience. We'll be talking about equipment. And a lot of vegetable farmers are really interested in examining whether or not seed is a good addition to their current vegetable farms. So we're really excited that these sessions complement the rest of the vegetable sessions so well. We invite everyone that's here for the SEED conference to come check out everything that's happening in the rest of the NOFA conference. And we invite everyone that's the NOFA conference to make sure you're aware of what's happening with the SEED conference. It's a really cool synergy and we're really grateful. And now I'm going to hand it off to Maggie to introduce the rest of our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maggie Erickson. I am the contract seed production manager at High Mowing Organic Seeds, and I have been lucky enough to work with Heron and Crystal in developing these two panels that we're going to hear from this morning, and there's another one at 2 p.m. this afternoon that I hope everyone will join us for. This morning's session starts with hearing a little bit more from Heron. He's going to talk to us about making the case for organic seed production in the Northeast. And then we're going to hear from two wonderfully experienced seed farmers in our region, Matthew Glenn from Muddy Fingers Farm and Chris Sanford from Yonder Hill Farm in Nova Scotia. And I would invite any present speakers from session 2 this afternoon, Roberta, Kristen, Matthew, and Leah, if you are here, please send me a message in the chat, and we're going to open the questions at the end to all the speakers across both panels so that we can get maximum knowledge sharing. And with that, thank you all for joining us, and I'm going to turn it back to Heron to give us the making the case.
All right, while I'm loading Heron's slides, I just want to mention one more thing. In addition to all of the excellent work that UVM is doing to collect information about what's happening with seeds in the Northeast, I'm working with Kristen Loria and a lot of the other seed folks to try to find some funding to build Northeast seed capacity, which is something that's been funded in other regions of the country. So we're also going to post an additional survey. I know you don't need any more surveys in your life, but we really need to collect some data that indicates what folks need in order to be successful moving forward. So this survey will help us prove to funders that diverting resources to seed production in the Northeast is a good idea. So if you are in the Northeast and you wouldn't mind taking 5 to 10 minutes to help collect some of that data, we would be really grateful. And we would be really excited to get some funding to continue this work in a bigger way. So thank you so much for that. We'll post that in the chat. I think I said that. Now
thanks for that, Crystal. I just want to, while you're pulling up those slides, acknowledge that before we go to the Q&A, we're also going to hear from Michaela Colley, who's with us from the Organic Seed Alliance, about resources for organic seed growers.
Perfect. See, it's great to tag team moderation because it allows us to pause and remember everything that we needed to say. This is good. All right, is everybody seeing Heron's first slide?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate everyone's patience. I'm actually calling in because I had what they call the bad audio. So those of us who have some technical difficulties, that I'm joining you. First, what I'd like to do today is just, I'm sure everyone knows that today is Martin Luther King Day. I am pasting into the chat a link to a YouTube video of the complete "I Have a Dream" speech, which I think we've all heard portions of it, but I think it's worth listening to. So today, if you have time, please listen to this. These are the types of things that are changing our lives, have changed our lives, and need to change our lives. Let's reflect on that for a minute and take a moment of silence. Okay, thank you all for joining us. I'm tasked with making the case that seed production is important. And when I first started thinking about this, the first metaphor that came to mind was the Empire apple from the Empire State, and how in the center of every apple, how you know that it's a good apple is it has seeds, and the seeds are ripe. But that's not enough. So I created a little slideshow to talk about how seeds in New York State and in the region have evolved, and where they are now and where they can go. So I'm really lucky enough to be working at Fedco Seeds as my day job. The other 40 hours a week, I have my own seed operation, farm operation, called Fruits of Our Labors, you can see there. Next slide. And I've been growing food for myself, for my family, and seed, both in plant breeding but also in preservation and for sale for many years. And I first started doing this where I was trying to grow rare varieties and direct market them or market them wholesale, and I did that for a number of years. And I found that the seed work itself was actually more profitable, and I had greater focus on that. But my first slide today is actually a poster by the sculptor and artist, my friend Steve McComber, who's a Mohawk seed keeper. Those of us in the European mindset really love the idea of cataloging things. We love our seed catalogs. And although I don't want you to see it through this way, imagine this is a seed catalog that is representing a small tip of the iceberg genetics that existed before we came here and exercised control via genocide and supremacy. So these are the varieties, or some of the a few of the many varieties that were bred, maintained, and grown organically. We're using this word these days in our region before we came here. Next slide. We're going to jump ahead another 200-300 years from that point of contact. And we're going to find ourselves in New Jersey with really this person, Peter Henderson, is the grandfather, if you would, of market gardening. This book, Gardening for Profit, basically has been rewritten by a person named Coleman. I don't think the Henderson family has gotten any royalties. But I want to reflect on what Henderson is saying, and this tells you what market farmers were doing at the time. It says if there's any one thing of paramount importance in vegetable gardening, it's the purity of seed. And for this reason, every seed that it is practicable for us to raise for our own use, we grow, no matter what the cost may be. And the story continues to share that at one point there was a shortage of early Jersey Wakefield cabbage, and an old gentleman had a supply, a 2-year reserve, and wouldn't part with any of it, and made a fortune from having pure seed that person had grown for themselves. So this is an example of every market gardener at the time in 1867 was really at the whim of a market for seed that was, a lot of it was being imported from Europe, and some of it was being grown here. And everybody who was smart knew if they wanted good seed, they had to grow it for themselves. So at the moment, market growers today see seed as another input that they can buy in. At this time, sustaining your business involved growing your own seed. Next slide. We're going to jump ahead to 1910, and this is a book called Success in Market Gardening. This is Rawson, and actually Herbert Rawson is the grandson of the original person who wrote this book. So this is a family business, a family farm, family market farm in Arlington, Mass. And this person's book is also a template for all of the market gardening books that we currently have. Next slide. And what you're going to find on these 2 pages is basically them saying that by good seed, we not only mean such as will germinate properly, but such as true to name and the very best select strains. It is proper in this connection to say that no one need explicit to get seed such as we have spoken of at such absurdly low prices as much cheap stuff is sold for. Better to pay twice the market price for an article that is the first class in every respect than have poor trash, even if it be had as a gift. At this time, you'll see that there are seed companies that exist in the region, but there's a lot of variance in seed quality. And growers are, at this point, still trying to figure out the balance of growing their own seed and possibly buying seed. The next page on 174, you see everyone who makes market gardening a business is obliged to raise at least a portion of the seed which he plants, and in order to do this successfully as regards its vigor and productivity, and so as to obtain the choicest of each kind, great pains must be taken in the selection and care of the seed stocks. So this is framing again that the market farmer has a role in selecting and maintaining and growing their own seed. Next slide. And you'll see here in this wonderful book, Vegetables of New York, another cataloging of varieties. I guess I would say an evolution in a way of what Steve McComber's poster of corn does. Again, artists sharing with us their perspective of vegetables. This is the variety Arlington White Spine on the I believe you're right, that is what was bred by the folks, the Rawsons. Next slide. So we see market farmers both growing their own seed and breeding new varieties, which is how almost all new varieties were introduced pre-1930, was by farmers and craft seed people. Looking at this field of lettuce, this greenhouse of lettuce, this is the Rawsons, one of their lettuce houses. So when they say market gardening, please understand at what scale this person is speaking of. Next slide. So here we have some seed companies that were started by some of these folks that were market gardeners and farmers who grew their own seed, selling to each other. This is from Ontario. This is actually full of turnip seed. This is the packet that's 100 plus years old, and the turnip seed within it is also 100 plus years old. This is from Brockville, Ontario. Next slide. And this is when before there was a blue Hubbard squash, we called blue Hubbard. Everything called Hubbard meant green Hubbard. So you can kind of date this by then. This is from the Card Seed Company. And please note the back of the seed packet that says grown by Card Seed Company. So again, these are farmers and craft seed people that have discovered that seed is something they can sell to each other. The earliest seed companies were basically family businesses, family farms that had become experts in their field. Next slide. And this is another reason that farmers were growing their own seed. Here is the canning companies. These folks maintained their own stock seed and actually had farmers grow the stock seed for the farm collective or for the group of farmers in that town or region that were supplying the individual canneries. Next slide. This is also a label from a can. This is a can of corn. And corn canneries were throughout the Northeast, sweet corn. Maybe folks don't know that pretty much all sweet corn genetics originated in the Northeast with corn from the indigenous community. And that's why corned sweet corn, both yellow and white, derives itself from the Northeast. Next slide. But did you also know that we also invented, go back one, that we also invented the hybrid sweet corn? Both Maine and Connecticut developed all the inbred sweet corn lines. that began the hybrid sweet corn industry. So these were the corn canneries and the farmers asking for more reliable corn that would ripen consistently. And actually, this hybrid seed was grown by farmers for each other in the Northeast up until about the 1940s, when we started outsourcing it to Idaho, because we had a couple years of really bad weather that caused both a failure in the sweet corn seed crop as well as a late blight for 3 years in a row. Next slide. Now we see the 1947 Robeson Seed Catalog. Robeson is a seed company, or was a seed company, from New York. Family business, family farm, had been craft seed people and began to grow seed. And we see by 1947, you can see in these descriptions of these corns the mention of these various different Connecticut experiment lines. And some of these varieties might be familiar to you. Next slide. And they grew their sweet corn seed, their hybrid sweet corn seed, in New York. 700 acres of hybrid sweet corn seed. This is a photo from their catalog in 1947. So you can see that all sorts of seed was grown here, and not just on small scale. Farmers were contracted to grow seed for companies like Robeson, like Asgrow, like Harris, like Eastern States Farmers Cooperative. Next slide. And this is them trialing their various different, breeding lines. You'll see this type of thing. This is if you're at Fedco or Johnny's or any other trial company, seed company, you'll see this in the trial fields. Us having some fun. Next slide. This is their drying facility for that sweet corn. Next slide. And as always, in order form from 1947. Next slide. Here we are in 1963, oddly enough, the same time as the speech that Martin Luther King gave, but this is the 1963 Robeson catalog. You'll start to see that hybrids are in this catalog. These are hybrid varieties that they've developed. You'll see the name Seneca as an appropriated brand name. These are varieties developed by the Robeson Seed Company in 1963. Some of these varieties are still in commerce, but owned by someone else. Next catalog. Next slide, Here we see seed saving becoming something that no one does anymore in 1976. Next slide. Here we see independent seed companies, Agway, which is derived from the Eastern States Farmers Exchange. Agway is a cooperative. Agway had been their own seed producer. Actually, the original butter and sugar corn was developed by and released through Agway. You'll also see Asgrow Seeds there, another regional seed company that had seed growers all through the region. Next slide. But here's what happened, my friends. All these seed companies got bought. They got bought by investment groups because they had amazing genetics that had been developed in this region. They had amazing gold that was developed in this region. So the tasty tidbits of a once functional regional seed system became just slop in a shareholder return feed bucket. Seminus was really just an investment group that bought Robeson Seed, Asgrow, Peto Seed, and a number of other companies. No one can work straw to gold. Instead, Monsanto and others have spent the last 20 years buying up all the unique and regional breeding gold from across the globe, from countries big and small. And remember, whoever has the gold makes the rules. So we've been told that seed can't grow in the Northeast. We've been sold a bill of goods that tells us that seed can't be grown and that certain types of seed cannot be grown. Here we see those same varieties from our region wrapped in an envelope, and then this envelope pre-packaged for Monsanto and now Bayer. So we're here today with some revolutionaries who grow seed on their farms in the Northeast. We're here today with a wonderful selection of small-scale seed companies who want to supply us. And what we need to do is, just like when we tell our customers, why they should buy a locally grown organic carrot. What we're trying to share with you is why you should be part of growing seed locally. This is not a xenophobic presentation. There are smart seed people all over the world. Please listen to Vandana Shiva speak about those seed people all over Asia who have had their seed companies bought up, their land stolen by mega corporations. We're not alone in this. And what we need to challenge ourselves is where our seed is sourced from. We need to challenge how those people and how that land is treated to supply us, organic farmers, and we need to become part of that supply. So we're hoping today that we can convince you to bring this into your farm production. There's a legacy and there's a consequence for seed not being here in our region. And I'm going to stop there and hand it over to Maggie and Matthew. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Heron. There is a little bit of time, a couple minutes for Q&A. If anybody has questions they want, burning questions they want to ask Heron, please drop them in the chat and we'll try to get them answered. All right, Heron, we have one. What types of seed are most needed to be produced here in the Northeast?
Well, needed is an interesting word. What is needed is to return to varieties that we rely upon that we can also grow seed of. As we basically conquered west of the Mississippi, and I want to explain this, in the 1940s and 50s, we used warlike approaches to basically bomb all of the wild lands in the West with pesticides because the bugs that were endemic there and native didn't take so kindly to us tearing up their landscape and creating monocultures of crops that were not adapted. And we have hence been breeding ever since to basically stop diseases and pests that have evolved basically or have become to be a problem with our colonial agriculture that we've been, our empire agriculture that we've been expanding in the West. And so we have this element where we believe that seed can be grown elsewhere better, but the cost of that with land control, with pesticide and fertilizer use, a lot of people don't know that seed crops are not treated the same as food crops, that a conventional seed crop can be sprayed with an excessive amount of pesticides beyond what a food crop would ever be allowed. So when the question is, what seed should we get grown in this region, we should grow all the seed that we can in this region. But part of this is returning to and breeding new varieties that actually produce seed well here. As we start to breed other varieties and grow crops elsewhere, we find that larger corporations are primarily breeding varieties that only produce seed well in very distinct regions in the world or in very distinct sterile, quote, environments, meaning environments that have been depeopled, deflorized, and defaunized that have basically become production centers. So what we need to do is return this responsibility to our own hands to be responsible for its impact.
Great, thank you, Heron. There are some other questions trickling in. There's quite a few asking about resources, books to get people started on researching the history of this topic. And I'm guessing we can drop some resources into a digital format for people to take away from them with them at the end of the conference. Some people are making recommendations in the chat. I would encourage you to check that out. And we are going to move on just so that our other speakers have a chance to get their presentations done, but we'll have a Q&A at the end and we will capture all of the questions that are coming through the chat at this point. So thank you, and I'm going to pass it on to Matthew Glenn of Muddy Fingers Farm.
Hi there. Hopefully everybody can hear me well. This is Matthew Glenn, Muddy Fingers Farm. We are out in Hector, New York, which is in the Finger Lakes area. As you can see, established 2003, so we've been running for a while now. We are a 2-person farm. We grow on about 3 acres. The order of our kind of significance of our income there is the CSA is our biggest source of income, and then farmers markets, and we do kind of a small amount of wholesale. And so even at this point, still even smaller percentage of our production would be the seed production, started several years ago. And Crystal's going to move my slides for me, but I wanted to say that, you know, before, if there's any questions, I'd love to go ahead and answer them before we move on to the next slide. I think Crystal was going to keep track of that for me.
If I can have Maggie keep track of the questions. It's a little hard when I'm sharing the screen to do that. So we'll tag team. We'll have a 3-person approach to this.
Yep, I'll try to flag you, Matthew, if there are questions specific to this slide.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate, just before we move on, I appreciate that. And probably no questions from the first slide, just a basic introduction to our farm there. So we started out, you know, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 years ago, just starting to grow some seeds for ourselves, as you know, lots of farmers do. Just maybe picking some crops that we felt like needed, I don't know, that maybe didn't grow so well for us. And so we were trying to just make some selections and for different things, just kind of playing around. So those are some of the crops that we have grown on our farm for seed, just for ourselves, and you know, maybe sharing around to other farmers. The beets, I love growing beets. They make a beautiful, wonderful smell like chocolate when they're flowering. So those have been the ones we've been growing the longest, along with parsnips. And I don't know that we've noticed any improvements on the beets, but I feel like we definitely have noticed some improvement on the parsnips, just being nicer size, less disease, straighter roots. The golden treasure peppers, we started doing that several years ago, just to try to select. They're beautiful peppers, first of all, and we were just trying to, but they're really late in ripening, so we wanted to select for early ripening, to some success, I think. And then just some of the other things there we played around with. We tried to do carrots one year. That was a lot of work, and it was unsuccessful for us, not surprisingly, but it was fun to try new things anyway. So unless there's questions, next slide.
There's one question here, Matthew. If you grow multiple varieties of beets, for example, how do you avoid cross-pollination between the different varieties on a smaller scale, like 3 acres?
Right, yeah, good question. We couldn't, we just grow the one variety. As you get into learning more about the different isolation distances that are necessary, you'll learn that, well, you can grow several varieties of some crops on your small farm, but some of them it's just not feasible, since beets are wind pollinated. It's just not an option. So yeah, just the Detroit beets for us.
That's great, thanks.
And after playing around with some seeds for a couple of years for our own use, we said, hey, why not try to diversify our income a little bit? And so we approached some different seed companies, and a couple were willing to work with us. And so we just basically have been open to growing whatever we've been just going based on their suggestions. We're still beginners, and so we didn't have particular crops that we wanted to grow for seed. So basically the seed companies have said, hey, do you want to grow this for us? And so we mostly said yes. And so we've grown different types of pole beans, which I'm guessing, it seems like we've grown several varieties of pole beans, and I'm guessing maybe there's an unwillingness for some growers to grow pole beans because of the infrastructure that's required, and the difficult, you can't mechanically cultivate them. So I'm guessing that's why there's been a demand for pole bean seed growers. Thus far, commercial, our seed production is a very small percentage of our total income, maybe about 5%. So it's not much, but it's it's a little bit of extra income stream for us. And so next slide. So the first thing we obviously had to do, being vegetable growers, we really did not have any connections with the seed growing world. So, we had to figure out how to connect with seed companies. It turns out it was fairly easy. I think we went to the first seed conference actually and just, struck up conversations, and that worked pretty well. And we went into it just being flexible about what we were willing to grow, considering what seed companies were looking for growers for, but also considering the potential income from different crops, but also not really knowing, being beginners, we didn't really know what potential income to expect from different crops, because we had a pretty good idea on our vegetable crops. Being new to the seed growing world, it's really hard to judge what your potential income is going to be on a crop that you've never grown before, and it's hard to estimate, well, how much pounds are you going to get out of the crop, and how much labor is it going to be. We did become certified organic, mostly so that we could sell certified organic seed. We had been operating for years as, not organic, never being certified organic at least. And this was kind of the impetus for us to become certified organic, so that we had a better market for our seed. As you're looking at what crops you might be willing to grow for seed companies, you might want to start off with annuals, just because they require, I feel like for the most part they require less work. So yeah, the next slide. Looking at the profitability of certain seed crops versus vegetable crops. Again, I feel like we're still beginners at this. And so, it seems like we're growing a new seed crop every year. So it is hard to compare the profitability of, I feel like it's hard to compare profitability of certain seed crops versus vegetable crops. Yeah, it's just hard to know what your yield is going to be. I have a pretty good idea what our yield is going to be for our vegetable crops year to year, although of course that varies as well. But I'm still trying to get a handle on different seed crops, what the yield's going to be. And of course it varies when you're talking about beans versus, some very small flower seeds. Yeah. And of course you can ask with seed companies as you're talking to them about, what kind of yields are expected. But I've found, as in growing vegetable crops, that's going to vary year to year based on drought, insect pressure, disease, of course, your yields can be a lot lower than what you might expect. Another thing to look into when you're considering which crops are right for your farm are isolation distances. That's a big thing, especially since you may already be growing this crop in a different form. So you have to consider, well, is this crop going to cross-pollinate it with my vegetable crop, or do I not have to worry about that because my vegetable crop is not flowering, so it's maybe a biennial, so you don't have to worry about your cross-pollinating with your vegetable crop. If you're interested in getting into biennial seed crops, note that that they're going to require more work, more storage capacity over the winter. If you're growing them the first year and the second year, in the past we've had seed companies provide the root of the biennial crop, and so we didn't have to grow the first year. If you have hoop house space for a seed crop, which I know, like most people might say, the hoop house crop is too valuable to play around with the seed crop, but we have used our hoop houses for seed production, and we're going to try some different seed crops this year in our hoop house. So if you have room, it helps prevent some of the disease problems that can happen here in the East with our more humid climate. It can keep the seed cleaner. And there on the pictures, you can see some of our super low tech techniques for cleaning seed. You don't have to have a lot of specialized tools doing it on a small scale like ours. And the bottom picture there is just our cooler this past fall, which normally we have both of our coolers full of vegetables, but due to the drought this year, we had extra room, so we were able to put a bunch of our seed in the one cooler there with a dehumidifier to keep it dry and store them there while we were in the process of processing them.
Matthew,
yeah,
we have one question that is specific to tools needed for harvesting, which is how mechanized is your threshing process? Did you have to buy a lot of equipment?
Not mechanized at all. We have grown, I'd say we've grown pole beans more than any other crop, so that's kind of been probably our most intensive labor-wise of the seed crops we've grown. And for us, the beans, it's just stomping them, carefully stomping them on a tarp. That's what we've come up with, and it works pretty well as long as they're dry enough. So yeah, not mechanized at all, and then just using fans for winnowing.
Great, thank you.
So I guess we can get into economics a little bit. I mean, it is going to vary widely. It has varied widely for us year to year based on, some of these crops we've only grown one time and then didn't grow them again. But even with the beans, which we've grown multiple years now, it can vary widely year to year. As you can see, those are some of the numbers that I had records for. For our vegetable crops, our kind of minimum per bed that we like to do is for a 100-foot bed, that is $400. That's probably way too low. We probably ought to update that. And some of these, so if you do the math on some of these, yeah, the beans for most of the time have not met even that minimum. But as so far, we are continuing to grow them, for better or worse. So then we grew zinnias last year, and that, as you can see, worked out quite well in comparison. So yeah, we are really just learning still about the income potential on different seed crops and feeling that out. Yeah. Yeah, so if there's no questions, I guess next slide. And we have not done an in-depth labor comparison on our seed crops versus our vegetable crops. For the most part, I feel like they're pretty similar. The one difference is that, well, some of these seed crops, you may be growing them, having them in the field for a longer period of time. So they might take more cultivation, more weeding, more attention and care. The harvest schedule is obviously going to be different. Some of these crops, we're out there harvesting once or twice a week. For example, with the zinnias, which we grew last year, we were harvesting them at least once a week. More the beans, they're harvested for the most part all at once in the late summer or early fall. Maybe you get 2 harvests out of them if the weather's nice. But yeah, I think that's it for that slide. And so last slide, these are just some of the pros and cons. Our time, labor concentration in late summer, early fall, for some people that could be a drawback, in that for a lot of the seed crops, you're going to have to put more time into harvesting them in a time of year when maybe you're getting tired, or maybe you have a lot of other harvesting already taking up all of your time. We have definitely had some crop failures along the way, with tomato seeds that we thought we had done well growing them and cleaning them, but they had all sorts of crazy seed diseases on them. We had a crop of runner beans that, for some reason, which we have not been able to figure out, was basically a complete failure this year. So, I mean, as with your other crops, you're going to have crop failures, and some of them, because it's kind of a new enterprise, you may not be able to predict, just learning as you're going along, kind of a steep learning curve. I said seed crops not as profitable. I should say some of them, as you saw in the previous slide, some of them were fantastic, and some were kind of below the average. And of course, this is in my limited experience. There's so many different crops that we could keep exploring. And I have found also that seed companies have actually been very willing to work with us as far as the pricing that's put in the contract for us. So we've really appreciated that. A pro, I would say, just to have some diversity to your income. Working with the seed companies we've worked with has been great. They've been wonderful to work with. And it's just good to learn something new and contribute to the regional seed supply. I mean, we started growing seeds several years ago as we were kind of starting to hit cruise control on our vegetable operation, and we've been doing it a long time. So we had we've developed a good system for our farm. So it was nice to diversify into something else and learn something new and get our feet wet in another area. So that's it for me, if there's any more questions. And bean pods apparently make a really good bed to lie on, dry bean pods.
That was great. Thank you, Matthew. We do have a couple of specific questions quickly before we move on to Chris. There was one about, do you make use of the food from your seed harvest, i.e. with peppers?
Yeah, for sure. Some crops you can, and we absolutely do with the peppers and tomatoes when we've grown those in the past. Sure.
And I think this one came right after you were talking about seed diseases. What phytosanitation techniques do you use?
Nothing in particular. I mean, with the beans, which we've, like I said, we've grown the most of. Unfortunately, it is really up to the weather. This past year was very dry, so the beans were very clean. No, just try to keep them dry, which is, can be hard sometimes. That's all I know of. If anybody has any more suggestions, I'd love to hear it.
And there was a question about what seed companies are you working with?
Right, Fedco and Fruition Seeds.
Great. Looks like there are some suggestions in the chat for phytosanitary practices, if people are interested. And there's also a question about sharing slides after the presentation so that people can really dig into the numbers that you presented, Matthew. And I think if you're comfortable with that, we can definitely make that available to everyone.
Sure, yeah, I'm sorry I didn't have better numbers. I feel like that's the nitty gritty of it, what everyone wants to hear the most of, but.
Oh, this is great. I think people are learning a lot. In the interest of time, I am going to move us on to Chris. So Chris Sanford from Yonder Hill Farm, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here. And then for the interest of potential connection issues, I'll stop my video for the presentation. I hope everyone can hear me well. So yes, hi, I'm Chris Sanford, and I'm co-owner of Yonder Hill Farm in Nova Scotia. And I'd just like to acknowledge that Nova Scotia is located in Mi'kma'ki, which is in ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So I'll move along here. Oops. So we established our farm in 2012, is when we purchased our land here in Nova Scotia, myself and my partner, Garrett. We have about 20 acres of drumlin fields, so it's sort of a glacial drumlin hill with lots of nice loam soil, very rocky. That comes along with the glacial till. We currently have about half-acre fenced garden and about 1 acre of field crops. We have potential space for doing a fair bit more of that, which we do plan to do in the future. And we are not certified organic, so we do grow by organic principles. Our inputs are seaweed, manure, compost. We don't do any sprays. Oh, excuse me. We currently don't spray anything for insects or anything. And we do most of the tending and harvesting and processing by hand. We have a bit of, tillers and things like that we use for growing, but primarily hoeing by hand and all that sort of thing. We retail our seeds on our website, which we launched in 2019, so fairly recently. So we've been, over the last 2 years, building an online presence and trying to get part of the market share in the online sales. We also retail our seed packets locally, both at markets like farmers markets and other events. There's it's called CD Saturdays in Canada that was first organized by the organization Seeds of Diversity Canada. And it's a really great local events they tend to happen on Saturdays in February through April, where smaller seed companies and seed growers gather to sell like a market type of event. We also have our seed racks we'll have 17 locations this season where we have, a selection of seed packets, mostly sold on consignment. Some places do a rack, buy a whole buyout of the seed packets, but mostly by consignment. And then we also wholesale some of our seeds to a small regional seed company called Annapolis Seeds. And that we've been doing for over 10 years. That's kind of how we got started, which I'll get into in the next slide. So why we got into producing seeds. It started with an idea of self-sufficiency and sustainable farming practices. Seeing how seeds are this link in local food security, but also farms food security or homestead food security. And we've come to really rely on our seeds for our own food production. So we do operate basically a homestead garden, producing a bulk of our own food. And we do utilize the food value in the seed as much as we can from the seed crops. So we found over the years, we come across varieties that work well for us, both growing in our garden, but also ones we really like in the kitchen. We found that on-farm adaptation is a real thing and an amazing thing to behold. When we first bring a variety to the farm, it may or may not perform very well the first year that we grow it or the first sort of generation. But subsequent generations, they'll just really adapt for seed production wise, but also thriving in our growing conditions for food as well. So definitely we've seen a big difference in our own seeds, but also when we bring seeds from other smaller scale seed operations onto our farm, they tend to perform a lot better. And this is speaking primarily about open pollinated seed. I find that there's a real range of quality in the open pollinated commodity seeds that are available globally from the global system. Sometimes you'll come across a strain that is really impressive, and who knows if you'll ever get that strain again. And so it can be really worthwhile to save the seed from a good strain. One of our biggest examples for our farm was a sugar snap pea strain that we originally bought from Fedco Seeds, I think in 2010. And it just really stood out as being really well taken care of and a really clear, strong strain of sugar snap peas. And so that's the strain that we've been keeping going all these years. It's also really a great feeling to be a part of preserving rare varieties that may be on the verge of going extinct. So we've been involved in a few different, preservation of rare varieties, both heirlooms and also more recent breeding vegetables. So it's really rewarding to maintain and breed our own seeds and kind of keep control of our own stock seed as well. And then, so the revenue piece, for us, we're still relatively small. Our total revenue was about $40,000 this past year. But I would mention that we have a very low overhead, I think, compared to a lot of other market farming operations. where we have virtually no cost of seed. I tend to spend about $100 on seeds every year, and that's more just from my interest in bringing in some new varieties or trying different things out. And this is both for our seed production and for our own food production. We also have always been very averse to taking on debt. And so we have a very low debt load and tend to go kind of bare bones and be patient in building up our infrastructure as we can. Both myself and my partner work off farm part-time, or at times throughout the year. I have a part-time job managing a community garden in the local town, and my partner's a carpenter, but we're both able to be flexible about sort of choosing when we need to bring in more income, mostly for building up the farm and renovating our barn and whatnot. So we're working towards building our capacity, and we're sort of still on a growth curve, I suppose, with our farm business, and certainly hope to, get bigger, get more business in the future. So I wanted to mention a little bit about kind of comparing market farming and seed farming. I did a little bit of market vegetable growing for 3 years, about 15 years ago. And so some of the comparisons would be that it can be somewhat less intensive. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that, sorry. It can be a little bit less intensive in some regards, where the work is more spread out throughout the year. Because we're focusing pretty much exclusively on seed crops, we do sell a little bit of produce here and there when we have excess to a restaurant, a cafe that's local to us. So the produce is kind of the byproduct, and so we're not worrying about marketing our produce throughout the growing season. We're really focused just on production. But then on the flip side, at this time of year in January, I'm actually very busy packaging seeds and taking in orders from our website and things like that, preparing for the seed selling season. So we don't seem to get as much downtime in a chunk of time, but the workload is more spread out. It's not quite as full on craziness in the summer, trying to grow everything, stay on schedule with planting schedules and things. We also don't focus as much on season extension because we're not worrying about getting everything growing as soon as possible. We have a longer window of time for planting. Let's see, we also do less irrigation, I would say, and less weed and pest management because we're really working to sort of breed tougher and more resilient seeds when they have more tough growing conditions with, the droughts and weed pressure and pest pressure. We do actually see results in that in our stock becoming more resilient against those sorts of things. So on that side, it can also mean that you don't need quite as much infrastructure to grow a successful seed crop. The seeds also end up being somewhat of a value-added product, where most seeds have a shelf life of a few years at least. And so we're able to hold some seeds year to year and be selling, like seeds from 2018, we're currently selling still this year. So that's also a difference with the market gardening. Where they're actually somewhat similar, when you're doing a diversified seed production, you're going to have some seed crops that are more profitable than others, same as you would with vegetables. And for us, where we are primarily retailing our seeds, we find probably a pretty comparable bed space revenue. For example, where Muddy Fingers Farm is, they're wholesaling their beans, whereas we're retailing the beans. So we're sort of capturing the full retail value. So that tends to offset a little bit the revenue that we can generate from growing beans. Although I will say that things like beans and peas are a lot less profitable than something like tomato seeds, where you can really produce a lot of packets worth of tomato seeds in a smaller amount of bed space. The next few bullets, I'm going to get into more detail in the next couple slides. But in terms of planning for seed crops, your garden layout and labeling are pretty important things to get into. The fact that seed crops often need more space in the garden or longer time in the ground than their comparable vegetable crop. And also we have to rotate which varieties we grow each year. So this picture is to illustrate the garden layout and labeling. We have a bed on the right of peas, and we always separate our beds of peas with a bed of a different crop. Here they're separated by some small grains that we were trialing, some oats and spelt and barley. And then here on the left-hand side, you can see there's another bed of peas. And if we were growing the two different varieties of peas adjacent to each other, then we risk them twining into each other and getting mixed up and things like that. What we use for labeling in the garden with our seed crops are cedar shingles. They last a really long time, and we write with like a paint marker. And that tends to last for multiple seasons even. And so we make our labels and put them in when we plant, and then when we harvest, the labels come with the seed crop and follow it all the way through. Growing seed crops is that you keep everything well labeled and not getting mixed up. This is a picture of in our greenhouse a few years ago, demonstrating how some of the seed crops need more space or longer time in the garden. We do utilize our hoop house for a number of seed crops. This is showing our lettuce, which we started as transplants in April. Transplant them, and you can see how we have them the varieties separated. And they're, not very far off from being ready to harvest for eating. And we do tend to plant more densely and thin them for ourselves to eat. I'll just point out we have our beets here. This was our first year that we grew beets. That's about 50 beets flowering there. And this was also our first year with a variety of cabbage, which I'll show you in a couple slides. And then here's the same plantation about a month later or so with the lettuce in full flower. And the lettuce becomes a full season crop. So whereas for vegetable production, you might be seeding lettuce multiple times throughout the season and harvesting it within a couple months. This is a full season crop that we start in April, and it's one of the last ones that we harvest in October. So it takes the full season in the greenhouse. We do the lettuce in the greenhouse because the seeds ripen unevenly. And so you can see here on the red lettuce, the little white specks are sort of showing the seed heads that are fully mature and ready. And they're actually, the plants are still sending out flowers. So by growing them in the greenhouse, we're able to just leave the plants until most of the seeds are all ripe and ready, and we can cut the whole plant at once and capture all the seeds. There's minimal loss of the seeds falling and things like that. And here I'll just point out, this is sweet basil. This was the second generation of the sweet basil. We did a trial of a few different basil varieties to see what would perform best in our climate. We did them outdoors, and this variety did best for us. So we decided to grow it for seed, and I did it in the greenhouse because, again, to kind of capture the most dry seeds, it keeps the moisture off of the seeds to do it in the greenhouse. The first year we had sort of not a great seed yield, and then this is the resulting second year or second generation, and it just did amazing for us and produced a lot of seed. I wanted to show you our process that we've been doing with a variety of cabbage, which is a regional to us, very rare heirloom variety called Cook Island cabbage. Cook Island is off the coast of Nova Scotia, and it used to host a vibrant cabbage industry. And that's a whole other story, but I don't think I have time for it today. But this is showing sort of how much longer it takes to produce the cabbage seeds. So in year one, we have seedlings. We're growing the crop very similarly. And actually, the last couple of years, we've partnered with a market grower, and this is a really great way that market growers and seed producers can partner together. We have some friends who are really good at growing cabbage, and so we been giving them the seed to start, and they grow the cabbage year one. And then we go for harvest time and select the best plants, and we've been able to select over 100 individuals the last couple of generations that we've done this cabbage. So we go and help harvest, and we strip the outer leaves off and actually harvest the heads off of the stems, and that allows our market growing friends to sell the cabbage at market, which also helps with recognition of the variety because they sell it as Cook Island cabbage. And so they get their market crop, and then we pack the stems into totes to overwinter and put them in cold storage like a root cellar, because cabbage doesn't typically overwinter successfully in the field in our region, and I imagine the rest of the Northeast region as well. So here's year two, and you can see the cabbage stems coming out of cold storage, and the side buds are sprouting. So we transplant them back into the garden, and they subsequently send up flowers and produce the seeds. We've had challenges with the heat that we've been having in the last number of summers. Seems to be a regular thing. Some of the brassica flowers will abort in excessive heat, and so we didn't have as high of a yield as I had hoped. We did irrigate set up a sprinkler on the cabbage blooms, which seemed to help preserve some of the seeds. I better move along here.
Chris.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is so wonderful. We do have several questions in the chat, so I'm wondering if you want to try to answer them, or do you want to finish up?
I don't mind. I was just watching the clock and seeing that we're running through. So I don't have the chat open. Let's see.
I can read them to you.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So there was one question. Is your farm income only from seeds, which I think you answered? You only sell a little bit of excess.
Yeah, I would add that we do sell seed garlic and transplants. So and a very small amount of produce currently. Yeah.
There was a question about a photo of your propagation and if there are soil blocks.
So that's a very nice observation. I started out years ago doing soil blocks, and I really liked them a lot for a lot of reasons, but I found that them time consuming to create. And so I sort of amended the method where I use open flats and fill my soil mix in, and then I do kind of a grid. And then at planting time, I either cut them into blocks or I just grab them out. So it's sort of my amended soil block method. Yeah.
We'll take a couple more, and then I do want to leave time for Michaela from OSA.
Yes.
The last one we'll do for now, and then maybe you can take a peek and type some answers, is what does your internet customer base look like?
Well, it's mostly home gardeners for sure. And that's has to do with when you're retailing sort of by the seed packet, and we're sizing things for kind of a home gardener type of market. We do have some market growers who will buy certain things like tomatoes and squash and things like that, but definitely primarily home gardeners for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. And
Yeah.
this slide in particular that you're on looks like it's going to answer a lot of people's questions about isolation. So I'm hoping we can make it available to people after the presentation.
Sure, yeah. Should I keep going or?
If it's okay, I think we're going to move on to Michaela just because we do have a hard stop at 11:45. So I want to
Sure.
give Michaela some time. Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
this
Chris.
is Heron. It's not a hard stop, but we know everyone's patience is at a certain level, and I also know that we may have some additional Q&A with raised hands,
Yes.
et cetera. So, Chris, don't worry, we'll come back to you. And yes, let's make sure your slideshow is totally available as a PDF on the app for folks to keep going.
Okay.
And maybe we can even circle back. Maybe we can circle back in the second half, or who knows? We'll just see.
Okay, well, just let me know.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to pass the virtual mic, to Michaela Colley, who's joining us from the Pacific Northwest, and she is with the organization Organic Seed Alliance. Go ahead, Michaela.
Hi, Maggie. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. How do I do that? Screen share.
Should be a green square button in the middle of your...
Yeah, I see that, but it gives me options. One participant can share at a time. Should I do that?
Oh, it should give you the option of sharing your actual PowerPoint, or if you're sharing it from Google.
Oh, here we go. I think, oh, okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Play from start. Okay, and I don't need too much time. I really appreciated Chris's presentation, and a lot of your points I think are sort of echoed in a few of the things I'll have to say, as well as some resources that might relate to some of the questions. Fortunately, I just remembered to mute my phone because my father just called me to see if I was making him cinnamon rolls this morning. So I'm here from Organic Seed Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization. Our mission is advancing ethical seed solutions to meet food and farming needs in a changing world. And Organic Seed Alliance, as Maggie mentioned, I'm based in the Pacific Northwest, but we are a national nonprofit that works with regional partners and has staff in different regions in the United States to develop regional seed systems, because seed is very, very relevant on a regional basis in terms of how you grow it, what you can grow, what the needs are for the region, and who the seed community is within a region. So as a national nonprofit, we work to support regional initiatives, but also to link those regional initiatives on a national scale, because there's a lot to share from region to region. Our work is focused mainly on training farmers to grow and save seed, and also to improve existing varieties and breed new varieties. And I think that's one of the most compelling reasons for saving seed is, you know, what Chris was mentioning a moment ago about the ability to adapt that variety to your region. So that's a lot of where our educational programs focus. We also have an advocacy program that advocates for policies that strengthen and protect seed communities. On the ground, our work is focused on participatory plant breeding, bringing our public breeders together with farmers and other community members to breed for organic agriculture, and also conducting variety trials, because a lot of plant breeding and seed production essentially starts by figuring out what grows well for you, what varieties do best in your region. Most market growers are pretty aware of that factor. And on that note, we do partner with Cornell University in the Northeast on collaborative variety trials on a project called NOVIC, the Northern Organic Vegetable Improvement Collaborative. And as I mentioned before, a lot of our programming is focused on teaching seed production, the basic kind of biology and how-tos around seed. We also publish a report every 5 years called the State of Organic Seed. And the next report is just the surveys for the report are just completed recently and will be released this year. The aim of the report is to measure progress in increasing seed availability, quality, and integrity of organic seed in the US. The report is based on a national survey of organic farmers. And the next report also includes a survey of seed producers in particular and seed companies. So looking at challenges and opportunities from that perspective. On our website, seedalliance.org, we do offer a number of free downloadable publications and webinars on seed production, on plant breeding, on how to do variety trials. And if you go to our website, under resources, there's a menu of options where you can search. We have publications on how to grow lettuce seed, carrot seed, bean seed, a lot of the crops that we've been talking about this morning. And you can find those there and download them for free. Under resources, we also offer a seed economics toolkit. And this toolkit we developed in partnership with organic seed producers and Highland Economics and Ag Economist. And the toolkit includes a number of webinars on the economics of seed, including webinars that are from farmers' perspectives who have worked with us on assessing profitability of organic seed production, including Daniel Brisebois from Canada, who has been mentioned in some of the chats this morning. There's a webinar of him speaking about how he approaches seed economics. There's also an enterprise budget that's an Excel template specific for seed, where you can track your labor, your input costs, your equipment that's seed specific that you're using, and assess the profitability of a seed crop. There's also one of the webinars that we did this past year. It was with Carl Sutton from Fresh Roots Farm in Montana. He's worked with us a number of years on the seed economics question, and he's been able to track the same crop for multiple years in a row and really look at why it was profitable one year and wasn't another year, which also underscores the fact that it takes time and you have to sort of look at that profitability over time, whether or not it was a good weather season, whether or not your spacing was the same each year, whatever you tweak to kind of see when it is profitable or not. I'd also say, as Maggie, I'm sure, can attest, and Heron, that seed companies want seed growers to succeed. It's a win-win relationship. And so tracking and documenting your costs and your profitability can also be a really effective tool for having a conversation with your seed buyer about what is an appropriate price and what is an appropriate, what you can expect for yield. So wanted to highlight one program that we have going on. It's an internship mentorship program that matches up seed production host farms. Fruition Seeds in the Northeast is one of the host farms. We are looking for more seed production farms to join the program. And essentially the host farm fills out a profile online, sort of like a seed mentorship match.com sort of thing, where the host farm can advertise that they are looking for interns, and interns can find host farms to work on to learn seed. And then those interns can also take an online course that we facilitate, that is a learning space where the interns get to learn from other interns that are also working on a farm. So a lot of peer-to-peer interaction, but also teaching the basic skills of seed production, the basic biology and how-tos, with a number of guest lectures from farmers and so forth. This evening, in one of the free evening meetups, we will be sharing a little bit more information on this program if you're interested. That's, I believe, tonight, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. On, excuse me, on our website, we also have a seed producers directory where seed growers can register themselves, and you can use this just a database to find other producers in your region and also for seed companies to find seed growers. We will be integrating the host farm mentorship profiles into this same database network so that you can also then use this tool to look for host farms. And with that, I just wanted to say happy Martin Luther King Day and share a quote from my dear friend Ira Wallace. I have a dream of good seed and access to good food for everyone. Ira's been a champion of seed and a mentor to many, many growers. And we're very lucky to also have her on our board of directors. So thank you to Ira. And here's some little bit more information or links to how to follow Organic Seed Alliance's work, and also my email, Michaela@seedalliance.org. If you have any questions, feel free to email me after the talk. And that's all I have for now. We can turn it back to Chris and or move on to some discussion. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Michaela. There was one question that came in the chat specifically for OSA, which is, do you have to be certified organic to effectively work with Organic Seed Alliance?
No. And sometimes I really regret the fact that we chose the word organic in our name, because essentially, as Chris was saying, seed is, doesn't know if you're certified or not. A lot of the same principles of ecological production, of, really wanting durable, resilient seed is relevant whether or not you're certified or not. So we do work with a lot of growers that are not certified. At the same time, the organic certification system is the only mechanism to sort of document and validate that seed is being grown without the use of a lot of pesticides. And because seed is purchased by most growers, we feel that it's an important mechanism for seed buyers to be able to support the system that they're supporting in their seed dollars. But that is, there's sort of the political, socioeconomic, and biological reasons for organic. And yeah, we work with a lot of growers that are not certified.
Yeah, this is Heron. I would just chime in that I am not certified, and I serve on the OSA board. So OSA is committed to seed sustainable and education and organic practices. And organic can also mean, as we said yesterday on Saturday, arising from, rooted in place, developed naturally. So that's the community we're hoping to build, and that's the seed we're hoping to grow. And I wanted to jump in just a minute and just say we have another session, part 2, at 2 p.m. And then we have an opportunity for folks that are interested to meet with people in the region who do seed contracting from seed companies. So that is at 5. It's a brief meet and greet for about 45 minutes. Get to meet these folks, maybe ask a few questions. And then that free meetup that Michaela mentioned, I'm going to paste some information into the chat as well as a evaluation form for this session. What we'd love to do is, we know that our interpreters actually have to go fairly quickly here, and we can continue with Q&A after they leave, but it won't be bilingual. So we're wondering if anyone who is a Francophone would like to raise their hand and ask a question in French. We have about 5 or 10 minutes before our interpreters have to hard stop leave. Thank you. No questions with the raising of the hands?
I'm monitoring the list here. I'm not seeing any raised hands. Crystal or Heron, let me know if you see anyone.
No, I'm not seeing any either.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that folks want us to return to Chris's presentation and let them continue forward? Sorry, Chris, we hope you can pick up where you left off.
I hope so.
So folks, the translators will leave at their as soon as they can. So that'll mean that you will all just start hearing this in English, meaning that as Chris is as speaking, as Chris's voice. So I apologize for the change. I want to give the translators thank you, everyone. Give them a round of hand clapping or just our thanks, and they'll be parting with us soon. Thank you so much. Crystal,
Yeah.
if you want to, or Chris, if you want to share your screen again, get back in business.
Sure, I will, and I'll try to be timely. I'll keep the chat window open this time. And yeah, and I do especially like have a slide on seed processing equipment that probably people would like. So
yeah, we don't have a hard stop.
Okay.
But I'm sure if we hit noon, I'm probably going to get hungry. So let's.
All right, sounds good.
Call it.
Okay, I will. I think I'm doing it. Everybody see that? And now I have to open the chat. Okay.
Looks great.
Yeah, so getting into rotating what we grow every year. I noticed there was quite a few questions about the lettuce potential for crossing. So just to address really briefly, and I know that there was some of this covered yesterday, and I'm sure it'll come up again, between self-pollinating crops and cross-pollinating crops. On the left, the list of self-pollinating crops: lettuce, peas, beans, tomatoes, peppers. For us, where we are located, we can grow multiple varieties of these with very minimal crossing. I'm talking 5% or less. Sometimes we don't see any crossing at all. And we have what's called low pollinator pressure at our farm. And that means basically, is there enough food for the pollinators that they're not interested in the self-pollinating crops? Because the self-pollinating crops don't tend to be as attractive to pollinators. It's not their first choice. And we are in a fairly, I guess, naturalized area. We have a lot of wild hay fields around. We grow a lot of annual flowers for the pollinators. We also don't currently have honeybees. I'll give a sort of an extreme example. I have a friend in Prince Edward Island who has a small organic farm and grows seed crops. And she is surrounded on all sides by potatoes. Those of you familiar with Prince Edward Island and its reputation as a potato producing space. And so the thing was, is her neighbor decided to get 10 hives of honeybees. And the only place for those honeybees to go in this sort of desert of potatoes was my friend's farm. And so she started instantly to see huge amounts of crossing in all of her self-pollinating crops. So it's really a thing that you need to observe. If you're saving for yourself or you're selling the seeds yourself, you're sort of in charge of your own, like quality control. If you end up having crossing, you deal with it. I imagine if you're contract growing for a seed company, they're going to have more stringent expectations potentially about isolation and things like that. We haven't really done that, so I can't speak to that. But, I observe, and every year I'm watching how much are the bumblebees on the tomato flowers, et cetera. And for us, when we get across, it's kind of exciting and interesting. And we actually have one of our variety of tomatoes. We've called it pink peach tomato, and it was a cross between pink princess cherry tomato and garden peach. And it's an amazing cross. We love it, and we stabilized it, and it's a great new variety. So it's definitely something to think about, and what your potential pollinator pressure is for your self-pollinating seed crops. Pretty much everything else is in the cross-pollinating category, which means you have to be staggering bloom times, and also feeling pretty confident that you have isolation either on your farm and also adjacent farms. some things, you know, there's not likely to be other farms having blooming Swiss chard or beets, for example, but there very well could be some broccoli going to flower in someone's garden, or squash in their compost bin blooming, and that kind of thing. So it is pretty important. So yeah, a lot of things we're limited. We only grow one variety of cucumber a year, one variety of watermelon, etc. And just before I move on to the next slide, I see a question. Standards to assess crossing. Really, because we're intensively using our own seeds, the assessment really has to do with year to year watching the different seed lots, and having been doing it for so long, we sort of know what to expect, I guess, and we know our conditions. When you're getting started, you know, it might take a few years for you to feel confident that, you know, okay, I know that my peas are stable and they're not crossing. We try to separate things to prevent accidental mixing, but then that also does something to kind of separate the potential for insect crossing as well. For example, our sweet peppers, we do all of our sweet peppers outdoors, and I space the sweet peppers quite a distance from the hot peppers, like pretty well 50 to 100 feet away, because I really don't want to risk accidental crossing in that way. If there's an accidental cross between a sweet pepper and a sweet pepper, it still is a sweet pepper, so we're okay, but we don't want it to go the other way. So, and then germination testing, we do germination testing. We haven't gotten into disease testing. We're not really a large, we're not a larger seed company. And because we're constantly growing all our own seeds, I'm observing it in the field. And so far, knock on wood, we haven't had really any issues, but it's definitely something I'd like to learn more about. So I wanted to show just really quickly a little bit about our hand pollination that I do on some of our squash, because we really like squash a lot and we wanted to be able to offer more varieties. And so it's something I do with the squash species Cucurbita pepo. The other species of squash I've gotten out of hand pollinating, and I just do one variety per year. And I use the other variety or the other species of squash to separate my patches of varieties of the pepos. So here you can kind of see there's these clusters of hills. And then I separate them with like butternut squash. And then there's another hill or another, 10 or 12 hills of a different variety. And I also arrange the vines as they grow to keep them sort of all together, because I end up in the squash patch every day in the month of August doing hand pollinating. And here's some pictures, seeing the female squash blossom, what it looks like when it's receptive. And I don't know how much time I have, so I might not get super into this, but basically some pictures of the spent male blossoms down here. Here I am actually hand pollinating. And I would say that this is cost effective only because we're retailing the squash seeds, and there's 12 to 15 seeds per packet. So I've realized there are some varieties that they don't produce as many seeds per fruit and are not worth hand pollinating. Whereas, other ones, other types of pumpkin and squash, you can get hundreds of seeds per fruit, and that becomes much more worthwhile to be hand pollinating. But this is the only thing that we hand pollinate is Cucurbita pepo. So yeah, our planting year, we're very busy planting like every other farm right up until early July. We sort of get a bit of a breather in July where we're not direct marketing anything at that time of year. And then August through October, we've got dry seeds coming out of the field. I see a question, will cucumbers cross-pollinate with other cucurbits such as squash? And to my knowledge, no, they really need to be in the same species. I guess there are examples of cross-species pollination between squash, I believe, but it's very rare and unlikely to happen, and I've never seen it. So yeah, so we grow one variety of cucumber, one variety of watermelon, one variety of melon. You do have to do a little research into the variety names that you're growing, because there are some things that are called a cucumber that are sort of botanically a melon and that kind of thing. So you have to be careful with that. But yeah, so here's some dry seeds, which we start watching things as they dry down. It can happen very quickly, things going from green to yellow to brown. Once dry seed crops start to turn yellow, you can pretty reliably cut them and bring them indoors to further dry. At that point, all the seeds are doing is, drying down. They're fully, I guess, mature. I do have carrots here. We do produce a small amount of carrot seeds. We do them in our greenhouse to get them started. So they're blooming ahead of the Queen Anne's lace, which they'll cross with. So we found very minimal crossing when we've grown out our carrot seed. It's been about 5% crossing, and the crosses are very obvious. They're white. So we can always we're basically one step ahead and pulling out any crosses. And this is parsnip seed down here, peas, obviously. And so simultaneously, August through October, we're processing wet seeds as well. And these we can harvest when they're ripe. And then we tend to let them sit and ripen even more in our sun porch or hanging out in the greenhouse. So here's tomatoes, which we ferment. We also ferment cucumbers. Here's my daughter a couple years ago helping to scoop the cucumber seeds out of the fully ripe cucumbers. This is an example of the cucumbers ready for eating and the cucumbers ready for seed saving. And this is the same variety, National Pickling Cucumber. So this picture shows and demonstrates the difference in ripeness for seed production. And then I put it in the wet seeds, but it's sort of one that bridges between wet or dries or peppers, which I tend to cut them in such a way to harvest their flesh for eating. We use it for canning salsas and tomato sauce and freeze them and lots of things. The tomato seeds this year, we used to dry them on plates, ceramic plates, which is great at a small scale. But this year we upgraded to small burlap bags that we put the tomato seeds in to finish drying. So here's a picture of the upstairs of our barn at the height of the seed harvesting time. We bring things in and lay them out. I use sheets and pillowcases. I find there's only really, I think, 2 different seed crops that could actually get through sheets. So it's a very effective means of containing even very small seeds, but it's still breathable. So we're able to lay out the sheets. We bring them into the garden, harvest into them, pull our label tag. So the label goes with the seed crop, lay out the seeds in our barn to dry further. Once they're nice and dry, we can kind of bundle them up and hang them up out of the way until we're ready to thresh them. When are the carrot seeds ready to harvest out of the high tunnel? I presume that means time of year. I'm thinking, I believe it's about September. Sometimes the nice thing about having them in the high tunnel is you can kind of leave them until they're until you get around to them, because they're not going to get rained on. So I find that the greenhouse stays nice and dry into October for us. So Another question, do you have experience planting your winter squash one by one in rows instead of grouped in hills? I have done that. I find that for just my organization of the varieties, growing them in hills, I get more plants in per space. And that, I like that for genetic diversity. And so it's just, I think it's a preference. I think you could do it either way, in hills or in rows would be fine. So yeah, so when you get into a lot of seed production, you're going to need space to lay things out. Our whole barn, it's a 30 feet by 50-foot barn, and our loft is a good chunk of that, and it gets pretty full, laying things out to finish drying and everything. So yeah. And then simultaneously, the sun porch of our farmhouse is kind of the designated space for dealing with the fruits and things. So here you can see years of squash harvest, and you can see all the painter's tape labeling. These are all hand pollinated squash. The Long Island cheese pumpkin was not hand pollinated. That was one that we grew just the one variety of that species that year. And that was what separated my different Peppo varieties. So the seed processing equipment. So once we have the dry seeds are dried and the plant matter is fully dry, we process them using our homemade, I guess, equipment. My partner Garrett deserves a shout out here because he is very handy and has he converted the wood chipper to be a seed thresher, and he also built the do it yourself seed cleaner here. So both of these we found plans online. If you were to Google wood thresher converted to seed, wood chipper converted to seed thresher, plans for this would come up. We found a used roto hoe wood chipper, and it's nice because as long as the rotating parts work, it usually comes with a gas engine hooked up to it. And that could be totally broken, that's fine. You just need to make sure that everything moves well. And then you install an electric motor onto it, and we've made it stationary in the barn. And it goes slower than you would have it running for chipping wood. And we just feed our plant matter through. There are some things that we're able to stick the seed heads in, holding on to the stalks and then pull the stalks out. But things like beans and peas, we feed the whole plant through, and it chops everything up, and not the seeds, of course. It bangs the seeds out of their pods, and then we run that through a rough screen to get the bulkiest amount of the dried plant matter separated. And then this is a do-it-yourself seed cleaner, which we found open source plans online. I believe they were originally put out by the Real Seed Company in the UK. And it basically mimics probably many tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. It hooks up to a shop vac. So the shop vac is providing suction, but very little actually gets sucked up by the shop vac. You pour your seeds in here through the funnel, and as they're falling with gravity, the suction from the shop vac is sucking up anything that's lighter, and it gets sucked through here, hits this little wall and falls. So you collect anything that gets separated. So if you accidentally suck a bunch of good seeds up and you need to run it through again, you've collected it all. These holes are in the back of the machine, and they control the suction. So for heavy seeds, these holes are all covered up, so you have full suction from the shop vac. So things like beans and peas. For lighter flower seeds and other things, you can open this up so that it's not sucking quite as strongly. Yeah, and so then once we have the seeds cleaned, then we're ready to pack, which, you know, this is an added amount of work from, you know, from selling wholesale. When you are retailing it yourself, it's more work with the packaging. We've gone through some different evolutions of our seed packs, starting out with coin envelopes and stickers. Now we have our packets printed, just the black and white border, and also some information on the back. We have them printed like that, and then I use our home printer to print the front of the packets, and I still handwrite some of them too. So we spend about roughly 20 cents per packet on the actual packaging. And then, you know, this time of year, we're very busy, printing packets and filling them and getting ready to ship out orders from the website and go to events and markets and things. So the packets that we actually order, it's called envelopes.com, and you can get them printed there. They have different sizes, and you know, there's different costs depending on quantity you're getting printed and how many colors and that kind of thing. So yeah, so we sort of go for having a beautiful product. We've found that in our area of Nova Scotia, there's typically a lot of tourists that come through. Of course, this past year that wasn't true, but when we've had our seed packets in stores that get frequented by tourists, we would have them seed selling even, you know, July to September, which I presume is, you know, visitors buying them. So yeah, so we try to make them an attractive packaging. This picture is from the Halifax Brewery Market in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which interestingly, this particular photo is from March 16th, 2020, which was, I think, the very last event that happened at all in the area. So anyway, yeah, so I think I flew through the end of that presentation there. Certainly, you're welcome to check out our website, yonderhillfarm.ca. And we do have a Facebook page for the farm that we share periodically, updates and things. And yeah, you can contact us through the website or on the Facebook. So anyway, thanks for sticking around late, everyone. And yeah.
Thank you, Chris. That was great. Thanks for finishing up. There was one question that came in about how do you store your seeds prior to the packets?
Yes, so that's a great question. And we have bins, so Tupperware bins that sort of are general totes. And then I use freezer bags. I find freezer bags are sturdier than sort of the standard Ziploc bags. So they seem to last longer and be a lot less prone to getting holes. We have an old farmhouse where we use wood heat. So by this time of year, our humidity is very low. And I tend to, you know, thresh and clean the seeds and then store them either in the bags or in some type of bucket or something with the label still, of course. But I leave the lid off or I leave the bag open until I'm very confident that their moisture level is very low, because that is a concern, of course. You don't want to close up a container with your, you know, the seeds you worked really hard to produce, and you don't want to lock in any accidental moisture. So I'm always monitoring that before I fully seal them up, which basically I just did a couple of weeks ago. So And yes, I did say envelopes.com is where we get our packets printed. It's from the States, so yeah.
I think I am so encouraged that so many people stayed around late. This is really wonderful. Speaks highly of you, Chris, and you, Matthew, and Heron and Michaela. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. And I hope a lot of you who are still on will join us at 2 o'clock for our second panel, part 2 of Intro to Seed Production. Heron, Crystal, any ending notes?
Oh, I think that's great. Thank you all so much. And yeah, hope to see you at 2.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you this afternoon.
I'm trying to figure out who has control of the recording.
You're host, as far as I know.
Did I become host? I am now finally. Okay. Let me
Yes.
see. Yep. All right. So I can. Oh boy. Stop the recording.
Can you leave us, or do you want me? Can I? Yeah. Are you able to leave us?
Yeah. I just needed to make sure I stopped the cloud recording first.